But first, a new exhibition has just opened at the Maine Historical Society in Portland. It's called Maine Eats, The Food Revolution Starts Here. And it uses food as a way to take a fresh look at Maine and its people.
The exhibition showcases what and how we eat and how classic Maine foods are caught, fished, hunted, farmed, foraged, and made. There's also something that every kid in Maine will want to be a part of, so will you. We took a tour, guided by Maine Historical Society curator Tilly Lasky and executive director Steve Bromwich. When you started thinking about this, what was the big story that you thought you wanted to tell?
Yeah, well, we've been thinking a lot about how we approach history, and for us, a lot of it's not about looking backwards, but it's really about thinking about where Maine is today and what people are interested in, what they're looking at. And clearly one of the things that is on everybody's mind is food. But we could also see so many of the themes were really going back to how Mainers have gotten their food for millennia, really. And we said, this is a great story, and it's a great opportunity to demonstrate how much of Maine today is shaped by history.
One of the things I like about this exhibition is that it reminds us that history, it's everyday life. It's the lives that everyday people lived, and certainly that's what food is all about.
Yeah, I think very much so. And I think, just to pick up on your point, as we look at history, it's really about who we are. So that's my favorite thing about this exhibit, which is the diversity of the voices. You know, as you go through here, you get, you know, story after story of historical Mainers, of contemporary Mainers, all sharing their little perspective on what it means to live and work and be in Maine.
You had to cover certain things. You can't tell the history of food in Maine without touching on lobster, but obviously you wanted to touch on the traditional, the tried and true, but also tell people stories that they haven't heard. How did you balance that out?
There are lots of people who work in the lobster industry, but what we chose to highlight is Sadie Samuels, who's a 25-year-old lobster woman, and she has her own boat, and she has to sort of prove herself as a lobster fisher every day. And so we figured that she was a pretty good story, kind of take that lobstering tradition and turn it on its head.
A lot of the foods and stories about the foods that people see here are deeply rooted in Maine: lobster, baked beans, ploys, poutine, and on. But you also have foods that are relatively new, that have been brought by new immigrants. What are some of those?
It's just a continuation of that immigrant story. So pasta was exotic back in the early 1900s, right? So what we're telling are stories about, like, what are the Somali Bantu farmers growing up in Lewiston? You know, what kind of vegetables are they harvesting? We're telling stories about Gabonese African immigrants bringing their food in. There's a woman from Cape Verde who has Portuguese influenced food that she cooks and fundraises in order to bring medical supplies back to her country.
I'm sure that it's been months, if not years, since the idea first came about. Now it's up. You can actually see these displays. What did you think when you walked in here for the first time and checked it out?
Yeah, I love it. What I love, it's colorful, it's bright, it's contemporary. You know, for a long time you come into a museum and you'd get a much more traditional curatorial voice. Let us tell you what you need to know about Maine food. So this is really told through the voices of Maine people and Maine communities, and hopefully the people who come into the exhibit will have that same feeling, and they walk in and they immediately see themselves and their own connection to the food story.
What every museum in the country does now, in a way that they didn't 25 or 30 years ago, is try to make things hands-on. Kids can touch things, they can smell things, and so forth. To that end, you have an Italian sandwich. I think we should wander over and check it out.
Here we go. One of, I think, Maine's proudest food inventions or heritages that we can claim is the invention of the ham Italian sandwich. And so it's an important part of the story. To your point about being interactive, the staff had the brilliant idea of copying something they did in Chicago a number of years ago with a hot dog.
Right.
So this is a converted hot dog, which is a ham Italian sandwich.
And the idea is?
The idea is that you don't just look at the ham Italian sandwich, but you actually get into the ham Italian sandwich and you can decide you want onions, you don't want onions, you want tomatoes, you want pickles. So, you know, it's designed to be interactive.
Now, you know, this is going to be the single most popular part of the whole exhibition.
It's very true. The funny thing is, I didn't really get it at first when the idea and the concept came up, but I can see how everybody has responded like wildfire. So it should be fun.
When you were going to school and a serious young man studying history, did you ever think that you were going to end up in an Italian sandwich in the Maine Historical Society?
I'm not sure I was ever a serious young man, but no, I did not imagine. And Rob, you need to have a chance to get in here.
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. In we go. When I get Italians, I usually tell them to hold the peppers. This time, I'm literally holding the pepper myself. Yeah. I tell you, every kid in Maine is going to want to check this out. It's actually rather comfortable, too. Am I wrong? Not just every kid, every adult. You want to be in that Italian sandwich roll, don't you?
Now. Yeah, you're holding the peppers.
It's a brilliant idea.
It is lovely, and it looks like you could just take a nap right there.
Yeah, it was, as I said, very relaxing, very cozy, really a lot of fun.
Oh my goodness.
The good news is you will have ample opportunity to see the Maine Eats exhibition and nestle into the Italian sandwich.
It's at the Maine Historical Society in downtown Portland, and will be there through February of next year.